Indeed, we're discussing youth at work and mixing with the youngsters here. Now, youth engagement has been at the heart of youth development, public policy and social change movements. Joining us now to discuss more on youth engagement is Eric Derrida, co-organizer of the National Youth Engagement, and Desiree Kashulik, I'm hoping I pronounced that right, Youth Development Officer at the South African Institute of International Affairs. Let me begin with you, Desiree. Now, of course, you guys at least are trying to engage the youth and get them to be part of the broader conversation and bringing them into the mainstream economy. How difficult is it? What strategies are you pursuing to try to make sure that the youth are heard?
Yes, so at SIA, the South African Institute of International Affairs, we're really engaging high school learners in particular, grade 8 through 12, and to a certain degree also undergraduate students. We've actually found that there's a great hunger and desire for young people to engage on big global issues, both that affect obviously the region, the continent, and the rest of the world. So we actually find that the desire is there in a very big way, and if we bring them through substantive programs, they've got great ideas to share. Yeah.
The challenge also is, of course, the youth are learning, and therefore there are a lot of things that they don't know, but there are a lot of things that they have ideas about which need direction and shepherding. Striking that balance is tough, isn't it?
I mean, I definitely believe it can be tough, but what's really exciting is that when given the opportunity, young people actually rise to the challenge in a way that we don't always expect them to. Yeah. We've had kids engaging about climate change issues, the BRICS Development Bank, financial inclusion, and they're all able to do so if we give them the right skills.
When they need a platform, Eric,
Absolutely.
From your side, how do you bring them in? But how do you bring them in a manner that does not in any way appear like you're talking down to them, but you're also making them participants and therefore a contributor to the debate and the engagement?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, I want to paraphrase Barack Obama. I mean, in politics in South Africa at the moment, there's a lot of people smacking each other around, throwing chairs, but nothing really gets done. We know that youth unemployment has hovered at about 50% for more than a decade. And a lot about getting young people involved and getting them to the table is about trying to turn the situation around. So it's about young people owning up to it, and which is why we founded and started the National Youth Engagement, because young people need to come to the table and contribute relevant ideas, not just be consulted for the sake of being young.
Tell me what you do and how you make sure that you engage all youth, because that's another part of the equation, isn't it? It's not just the guys that are sitting in the main streets of Cape Town and Johannesburg. How do we get Limpopo involved?
Absolutely, and the organization that I'm part of, Inkulu Free Hate, which was the co-organizer of the engagement, it's a new organization, and a lot of our model, and the model with which we've got to youth in all areas, rural and urban, has been involving people from those areas. Right. So you have a national process which involves people in the suburbs and in the main capitals, but you also get people involved in the rural areas, which involves a lot of time and a lot of effort. But we find that people in those areas are willing to come to the table, and young people in South Africa have an intuitive idea in many senses about where the country needs to go. But at the moment they're excluded. As we know, economic progress since '94 has excluded the majority of young South Africans.
Yeah. So give me quickly, I'm giving you a platform here to tell me what you guys are doing as the National Youth Engagement.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I think Trevor Manuel drew on the National Youth Engagement in his speech in Parliament 2 days ago was because there is a lack of young people coming to the table with real ideas and innovations. And what we did with the National Youth Engagement, myself and co-organizers Kwezi Gondile and Adrian Cox, is say, how do we engage with the government and the National Planning Commission, but come to the table with actions? And we brought together more than 30 organizations to say, how can you commit in your own programs, in your own areas, to both the dissemination of government policy, but also how can you commit to assist and affect government decisions and hold government accountable?
Right. And how is it working out?
Fantastic. I mean, the momentum is tremendous. The government is willing.
So you're saying your voice was heard in the NDP as well?
Absolutely. By the NPC. The NPC, and again, Trevor Manuel dedicated the only youth section of his whole speech in the President's budget vote to the NYE. And that was done because of the fact that the ideas that came from these people, and they came from all across the country, were systematically relevant, which is what young people forget to do. They get so excited by being involved in the first place because it's a novelty, that they forget to look at what the government needs and how we can help the government achieve those goals. And this is at the center of the NDP, is partnership. democracy is a messy game, and part of what the NDP is trying to do is trying to integrate the different strands,
Right.
and it requires stakeholders, in particular young people,
Yeah.
70% of the country, to come to the table and say, how do we transform the situation? How do we get to sustainable economic growth that's
Yeah.
inclusive?
Yeah. Desiree, is enough being done on the part of government? I mean, we've got Parliament involved to some degree now. They've got their own youth initiative. I was just reading about the theme of this year's Youth Parliament, where they say it's youth at the center of economic opportunities. Now, of course, it's nice to put these words and say we want the youth at the center of economic opportunities, but the key is the strategies that they pursue. Could there be more? What could they be doing?
Yeah, and I'd also like to make a point to say that, a lot of times when we speak of youth, we're
Yeah.
thinking of adult youth. And I don't know if we're always
Who
doing
are we?
enough.
Let's define this.
Yeah.
Who is this person?
I think a lot of times when we're talking about youth programs, sometimes it's that demographic 18 to 30, sometimes
Yeah.
18 to 34. But
Yeah.
if we think about this very momentous weekend, we're actually talking about high school learners as well.
Yeah.
And I would argue that we're not always doing enough to engage children in the process as well. So we have youth and children, obviously, there needs to be more platforms in general to involve all these groups.
Yeah.
But I would argue that in big way, we need to start bringing in younger high school learners in this process in a bigger way.
Yeah.
In terms of what's actually being discussed, I think we actually need to bring them into the discussions, into the negotiations, and not
Yeah.
have them on the fringes of these events or as a nice to have kind of, I've read a speech and then I go away.
Yeah.
But actually have substantive programs whereby young people are brought through a process, they know their stuff, they can speak to these issues,
Yeah.
and they actually have a say in what's happening.
Yeah, yeah. How much, how often though? Because remember, you guys are still at school, right? So you're still learning, and there are a lot of things that you need to do besides starting
Absolutely.
thinking about the bigger picture.
Well, I would say that actually, if you look at what's in the curriculum, a lot of these big global issues are tied in directly to the curriculum. If we look at life sciences, we look at geography, we're talking about sustainable development, we're looking at economics issues, we're looking at climate change.
Yeah.
All these things are there. And what we actually need to look at is how can we start bringing younger people into the game now,
Yeah.
not just have them wait on the
Yeah,
fringes,
yeah.
especially when we think of things around climate change,
Yeah.
sustainable development. Why? Because these young people are going to be inheriting the burden even
Yeah.
greater in the future. Yeah.
Is that just June 16? Is it a series of regular events? Is it building it in the curricula, as you say?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In terms of our programs, it's a year-round academic program, and we work a lot with varsity students and obviously hundreds of, actually thousands of high school learners across the country involved in our program. So you're absolutely right, it's throughout the entire time. We always look to capitalize around certain events.
Yeah.
We actually had a theme recently that was talking about Millennium Development Goal that looked at education
Yeah.
and where to after here on the post-2015 agenda.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, it's something that must happen throughout the course of the year and all the time, not just around a specific
Yeah.
date.
Eric?
To add to, I think, your question about, and to add to it, about the consistency element.
Yeah.
I mean, the National Youth Engagement was the start of a long process. And to build on that momentum, part of what we, as Nkulufored, are doing is we're launching a big campaign. As we know, as you said, it's often we focus on June 16 and forget
Yeah.
that there's a
And then
longer
we
term,
move
bigger
on.
picture. Absolutely. So what we are saying is that we have a big election coming up in 2014.
Yeah.
It's the fifth big democratic election in the country.
True.
And we know that there's a big dark hole when it comes to young people engaging with policies and engaging with political parties. There's a big information gap. So we're launching a campaign to build on the momentum of the National Youth Engagement called Our Vote, Our Voice, to look at informing policy debates and sanitizing information
Yeah.
so that young people can really access the information and that they can get started in engaging on the issue substantively and consistently over a period of time.
Yeah. So from what you're saying to me, it sounds like you are satisfied with the engagement, at least that you've had with the NPC. And should I read that with by extension with the government as well?
I think, yes. I can't speak more broadly than my own interactions.
Sure.
I've interacted with some of the chief directors and some of the departments, and my understanding is once you get on the inside, and this has been the interesting shift in my thinking, is there's a lot of, like I said earlier, is that there's a lot of chair throwing, a lot
Yeah.
of smacking, but nothing really gets done.
Yeah.
But once you talk to the guys on the inside, people in government a lot of these people are very sincere and
Yeah.
very committed, and the perception is created that they're lying around, lazing about, and not doing anything. In many cases, they are. In their best understanding, they are doing what they can
Yeah.
to get us to where we want to go as a country.
Desiree, you want to add quickly
Yeah,
something?
just to say, I mean, I definitely believe that there are a lot of willing people within government, and we've seen that. I think the challenge becomes the actual implementation of these ideas.
Yeah.
So it's not enough, for example, we had a children and youth negotiation session at COP17.
Yeah.
It's not enough for the minister just to hand over and take something, but where to from here? What's the next step? Are we actually taking into consideration these things?
Yeah.
And where are the fruits of our labor when it comes to policy documents?